Good evening and welcome to the show. This is the Trend Show and I'm Hussein Robert. We are talking about agriculture and how we can build the economy and empower the youths as far as agriculture is concerned. Agriculture so far is the backbone of this economy and it contributes to a lot more, around 33% to the GDP of this country and employing around 40% of the total population. 70% of the rural population. Today on the show, I'm joined by one Dr. Silali, who is the CEO of Geneplus Global. Thank you so much, and I'm very humbled that you found it fit to attend the show today. Kindly, in 1 minute, would you introduce yourself to the audience as we start the conversation?
Good evening. My name, as you've been told, is Silali. I'm the CEO of Geneplus Global. Geneplus Global is an enterprise that works within the agricultural sector, particularly livestock, and our forte mainly focuses around genetics and genetic development. Our portfolio runs between dairy enterprises and beef enterprises. So our main contribution to the Kenyan economy has been matching our genetic potential to the global genetic offer by providing advanced genetics into our farming systems in Kenya.
While agriculture is the backbone of this economy, very many people would not want to invest in it in a technological way, the way your organization does. So what really inspired you to work in that line?
All this is because of my past experience. I'm a veterinarian by training, and through my entire employment journey, I have been working within the sector, mainly working through private sector in input distribution, as well as non-government organizations where I was leading a market systems change through donor-funded programs. My passion to go into enterprise was guided by the fact that I realized there's much more that needed to be done in a more consistent way that to help our farmers achieve some meaningful change. If you look at most opportunities you get out there, you get to the tune of the mantra of the owner of the business or the vision or mission of the business, and at times when you're enthusiastic enough, you might find that some have mismatches. So my dream was to find my own vehicle to be able to drive my agenda to ensure that I'm bringing some meaningful change to our farming communities in Kenya.
It is Gene Global. I'm looking at the name, and the word gene comes from the genetics.
Okay, what we do with genetics is I would maybe just give you a small background about what genetics means. Genetics is like a foundation.
Yeah.
And like, for example, if you look at a building, what makes that building beautiful, standing tall, or towering above others is always a foundation.
Yeah.
So genetics is actually foundation to production. And in livestock, even in crops, that if you want to produce good maize, you need to have a good seed. And that seed is actually powered by the genetic makeup of that seed.
Yes.
So what we provide is not per se supporting farmers to be able to produce milk or participate in the chain of milk production.
Yes.
But what we do is provide the seed to produce those good animals that would be able to produce high quantities of milk. So we support farmers to be able to invest in animals that produce more, increasing per unit production.
Yeah.
So basically we are trying to potentiate those enterprises to invest in highly productive units in animals that would therefore give them reward or returns.
Now it is called a global. Give me the range of your market. Is it you're concentrating it within Kenya only, or Africa, or East Africa, or you're also working with other continents?
When Geneplus started, we started partnerships, global partnerships.
Yes.
And as of now, we actually have partnered with the best of the world in livestock genetics.
Yes.
And this was to be able to create an environment where we are able to cross-learn from global best practices.
Yes.
So that we're able to give the best offer. And as at the moment when we started, our focus has been Kenya, but we have a dream. We are a new company, quite young, but the passion within Geneplus has been to create a global brand and also invest in our own locally nurtured genetics that we can supply globally.
Yeah.
So we are growing towards that. We know there's a lot of potential because, as you know, the human population is increasing each and every day.
Yes.
So the demand for food, the demand for protein is increasing, and there should be some more concerted effort in making this happen. So we think that we'll be better placed as time goes by to be able to be that one company that's producing sufficient support to help farmers produce enough of this.
Agriculture being the next area of entrepreneurship where the youth should be putting a lot of their strength, because job employment in this country has really gone down. Now, I wanted to know how is the government of Kenya, our government, supportive of agriculture? Are they really coming handy to offer the support that are needed? One, by maybe making the processes of accessing other things easier, or financial support? So how is the government coming in to make the work on a daily basis be easier?
I think it's a very complex area to tackle. One, from my own perception, I think government is doing very little as it concerns agriculture. Government ends up gaining much more from agriculture than it invests. And there are even declarations like there's a declaration in Maputo some time back where governments were actually urged to give at least 10% of their budgets to agriculture. Kenya hasn't gotten there. So that way, to me, I would say the government has failed the farming community. And again, when you look at what is happening in Kenya, quite a lot of our political class or even government policy at times allows importation of produce that can actually be produced in Kenya. That's a killer in itself. I think we need more concerted effort. We need more policy regulation being empowered or enacted to actually favor the local farming communities. But as well, there are other areas where government has also just gone silent. Like, for example, there's a huge issue about land fragmentation. The government hasn't actually done anything, and land is primary to production everywhere.
Sure.
So when we continue doing land divisions the way we are doing, or further even commercializing land into concrete, and a lot of agricultural land is actually now being turned into urban centers, and government doesn't seem to have a policy framework that can actually control that. Or probably at times there might be some kind of goodwill to do that, but a political class would have maybe some kind of pullback on the same because of some political interests of maybe voting and all that in the future. But again, all is not lost. I think government can still do much more because Kenya has still a lot of vast lands that can be converted into agricultural productive land. As we know that Kenya is only utilizing probably 20% of the entire land mass, and these are called the arable 20% of Kenya. Reason, because we are also rain dependent, so we only do what is called rain-fed agriculture. But again, if we were to look at the entire country and how we can convert it into productive parcels of land, the way we try to do with Galana Kulanu, we can still do a lot in the northern Kenya, and also even the Masai rangelands can also be converted into something productive. So there's much more that can be done, but again, it needs political goodwill. It needs some level of open discussions about what future of Kenya should look like, as well. To shorten the whole big thing about looking for easy business opportunities where people want to import in products or produce from across the globe at a cheaper rate rather than empowering our own farmers.
What is the importance of agriculture as far as food security is concerned in our country? You've talked about a number of plots and lands are being used for putting up the buildings.
I think putting it in a parallel line, I think agriculture is equal to food security in essence.
Yeah.
And there's no country in this world that can be food secure without proper agricultural practices or enterprises. Because apparently, if I give you and this is something that all of us have to have in our logic,
Mm.
is to say, where else can food come from apart from land? Where else can food come from apart from agriculture? Nowhere.
No.
You can't manufacture food from the factory. You can't create food from thin air. So agriculture is actually what produces food. And one thing that that is very clear to me is that for as long as population is increasing each and every day, then agriculture becomes a very key sector to focus on. And agriculture is bigger than technology. Agriculture is bigger than any other, healthcare and everything else. One, I'll just go back to the scenario that has been eating the world, COVID-19. COVID-19 is about healthcare. What is the building blocks of your health is food.
Sure.
So if you need to be healthy, you need to have access to food. Sufficient, quality, balanced diet. So essentially then, agriculture is a backbone of humankind. If you have any plate, if you go to any restaurant, however class it is, whatever you find on that plate is actually coming from a certain farm. And there are even some pictures I've seen across the world that if you enjoy a plate of meal anywhere, know that there's one farmer, a dirty farmer somewhere in the fields that actually made that possible. So food security is only possible if we have a working agricultural sector. So an empowered agricultural sector is the only way you can actually ensure food security. Suppose other people would actually talk about importing food, but you're importing from a country that is stable in agriculture, that has put systems in place. So today, if you tell me that buying something from Brazil or Mexico or whatever else, or Pakistani is cheaper than Kenya, then that actually, if you're a politician or whoever, which kind of policy maker you are, then it actually, you're just pointing at yourself to say that you don't have a working agricultural sector or the policy framework that supports the farmers. So what we need to do is actually to look at that much more than actually looking for shortcuts of importation, or maybe not reviewing what is biting us around the agriculture sector.
Highlighting that, now what would you say that are the role of agriculture in global economy and building the economic development?
It's a backbone, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
Agriculture is the backbone of the world.
What's the advice that you'd give these youths so that they work with, so that if they have a piece of land, they can make use of it, knowing that at the end of the day, they can have or make some cash out of it? In other words, we talk about agribusiness. How can that be done in our country with the small pieces of land that we have?
Okay. I think one of the things that I've seen is, I think, and it's a generational issue that we might be having, that a lot of youth, their perception about what they want to be after school or after college or after whichever kind of training is a kind of white collar kind of job, or nowadays there are kind of variants or in-betweens where people want to have a classy life within an urban center and still have a good life without really looking like they are engaged in dirty enterprises. But one thing that I want to also just maybe to talk to the youth about is agribusiness is not entirely just on the farm. Agribusiness is a whole entire chain. It actually involves production, transportation, processing of that food, distribution of that food. It means so much. So you might want to choose which part you want to play, but within the agribusiness sector. And it doesn't have to be limited. Agribusiness is only not limited to a farm. You can actually start a business in that is agribusiness oriented. That is just processing of the food that is from the farms to the market. That's still an agribusiness enterprise. But essentially, the youth also needs to understand that there are things called market saturation of portfolios. And there are jobs that one time, like if you talk to people who are like our fathers, you'd find that there are some particular fortes or particular professions that didn't seem to be saturated, and they were the go-to professions. Right now, they're actually saturated. Some of the jobs, the big names that you would see as professions earlier on, it's very difficult to survive in because the market is flooded. So it is now becoming creative. And what I'm trying to tell people is, yes, there are many things that will get saturated, but something that is dealing with primary survival of humankind will never get saturated. And this is like food. Food is something you don't think about. You have to get 3 meals a day. In between, there are people biting snacks. So its food production is actually very sustainable as an enterprise, because future depends on it. And people that are being born today depend on it. So if youth would change their mindset and think that money is money. There are people who say that when you have money in your pocket, at times no one really cares where the money came from. So money is money. Are you looking to get a livelihood? Are you getting to get rich? Then it is time to rethink about agribusiness. And the enterprise can be as suitable to you as you can choose within the chain. You can have a few working within the production system, which will need or entail land. There are those that can work within the transportation and processing zone. There are those that can work within the distribution zone. So there are many, and when you look at businesses, like for example, if you look at our vegetable market, it came from a mamamboga, from markets, small dingy markets or shanties, to now very complex enterprises where we have people like zucchini, we have people like Fresh and Go, and we have people like, for example, the supermarkets. They're now doing actually what is actually an agribusiness. They are off-takers of produce from farms. So I think you can invest along the chain. So you need to look at it from a wholesome point of view, and also say, where do I suit most? There are those youth that will be very comfortable at production. There are those that will be very comfortable at the route to market, where it can be within transportation or processing or distribution.
And distribution. Yes. Now, having highlighted that, would you say that the financial of agriculture, when someone is investing in it and getting the outcome,
yes,
is it getting to be stable over time, or it is seriously deteriorating over time?
Finance in agriculture is available if you look at it appropriately. And for what I know, that even many banks have an agribusiness section nowadays, and they have an agribusiness packages where they actually finance farmers or people within the enterprise. And as well, there are also a lot of donor projects that are going on in the country that are also supporting such enterprises, innovations within agribusiness sector. Additional to that, I think Africa is being prepared to be a food basket of the world. And we have not been taking advantage of that. If you go to South America, for example, where we are on the same latitudes, they're producing a lot of food, supplying the US and even Europe. So Africa is at a point where we need to choose and make these steps towards that, to take the advantage of that. Because again, Brazil will have, as a major player, would have that much they can do. Then what else is going to happen? We would need to convert Africa to be the next frontier for the same. But this will have to have our young guys now change their attitude towards agriculture. I have traveled a bit, and I have gone to farms where people go to school specifically to come and work on their own farms. And they just don't go to school to get primary education. They actually go to school to get tertiary, even master's level education, to come and implement the same things on their farms. And farming enterprises across the globe are serious enterprises. People have invested quite good money. So that's the direction we need to go to. And to me, I think the fear of saying that finance in agriculture is not there, I think shouldn't be there. People need to start and fail before you have a blockage in your head to think that there's no finance, because I think, as per me, there will be available finance for that.
Talk to me about market concentration.
The whole mismatch, or the concept of agriculture targeting our own local market, is something that doesn't work. And it affects many enterprises. Like, for example, the dairy sector, we have had this cyclical word by the name glut. Milk glut is where we produce more than we can absorb, because apparently our Kenyan farmers have been coined to produce for the Kenyan market.
Yes.
But when you look around Kenya, for example, around the neighbors of Kenya, our milk deficit, why aren't we able to take up those markets and export to those markets?
Yes.
But that also goes back to how our market orientation is made, and how market policies are made, and how the support to the farmers are made. Because some of the export markets as well require very cleanly produced food, a traceable food, and food that can assure the buyers or the consumers that it's safer for them. Our Kenyan production system lack any of that, and not to mean that our Kenyan food is unsafe. Most of the food that we have in Kenya is very safe, but we don't have a match-up information that can actually assure the world that food produced in Kenya is safe. So we need an investment in that, and that opens up the export potential. When we have export potential, there will be no time in Kenya where we'll have sufficient, because what we produce is almost just exact what we need. But again, that has limited people investing. If you have a farmer today who has opportunity to increase their milk production, and when they increase, they are told there's a milk glut, then they're actually limited to what they have. So you have actually capped that farmer from expanding or from growing. Or you have also capped the farming community from having new entrants in investing into farming, because they are aware that when we produce more, then there will be no markets. So I think an expanded market where we have opportunity to export, that is very critical to avoid that. But again, on the flip side as well, Kenya, many times we also have times where we lack. So we can produce in wet seasons a lot of food, and in dry seasons we don't have. So we also need to put in place conservation mechanisms. How can we conserve the food that is overproduced in wet seasons to be used in dry seasons or in seasons where we lack? So that also stabilizes the market, because what is important in agribusiness then is that as much as production on the farm is very important, then the market is very critical.
Yeah.
Because these people should produce to be able to be assured they'll be able to sell.
Yes.
So stabilizing the market by all means, looking at export potential, conservation, and all other models that are available, including distribution network. In Kenya, we have a situation where you can have a lot of tomatoes in Nyandarua, but there's none in Turkana, which means it's just actually a problem of distribution, and that's a market-oriented solution. So again, can somebody come up with a model that can actually ensure that whatever is produced in a next place in Kenya can actually access a next place in the other part of Kenya?
I know you've highlighted the market concentration problem, and that is a challenge that agribusiness people are facing.
Yes.
But again, I would want you to highlight to me just now in a full package other challenges that the people that are investing or coming into agricultural field are facing or they're likely to face, so that, and also how can that be sorted? Now you've talked about market, and that is one of them, and you've highlighted how the remedy.
I think primary to maybe having everything checked would be information.
Yes.
A farmer, an empowered farmer, is a farmer that can actually be profitable.
Yeah.
But again, in Kenya, we do not have a proper extension system where farmers are taught on modern technologies, on best practices on the farm. So most farmers actually learn from neighbors or learn from their peers, and most of the people they're learning from are also not doing so well. So we need to have an information system that actually supports these farmers. We have repositories of information that can be easily accessible to farmers, and to also avoid farmers depending on Google per se, because Google is as much information on Google is as much biased as the person who posted it.
Yeah.
So it is not, Google is not a good source of information for somebody who is actually in a serious enterprise. So we need modules that work for Kenya, and modules that are specific to different zones that support our farmers. So extension and information sharing is very critical. The second thing would be what we just talked about, market. But market is affected by another issue, that is infrastructure. You find that quite a number of farmers are producing from very deep-seated villages, and having this produce leave these villages to the market is a problem. And you've seen, I think, common pictures around Kenya where you see farmers with donkey carts carrying some stuff to the market. Yeah. It's a pity. We need to have actually invest a lot of, rather than having all these tarmac roads everywhere, we need also to have a targeted support to agriculture zones where we have proper infrastructure. As a layer on that, then also you ask yourself, finance, as I talked about it earlier, again, a layer of finance has been an issue where people would want to say, like, for example, if you're a young person and you want to start business,
Yes.
a lot of finance have been coined around ensuring that you have some security before you get a loan, and such can also basically pulls down a lot of farmers and a lot of youth entrepreneurs who want to go into agriculture. So wholesome, I think, and maybe also to look at the policy framework, the land tenure systems is a big challenge. If you look at our market orientation and support is a big challenge. And also, like for example, I will talk a bit, I do not know much about tea sector, but tea, coffee, you've heard about the problems that actually affect these sectors.
Yes.
And all these are actually government parastatal oriented challenges where people are siphoning more than the farmers, and yet these people, they actually put on the table is very minimalistic. So again, those are some of the challenges government should also look into, because they kind of, a robust tea sector in Kenya would easily take a nosedive with the challenges it has.
Yeah.
And this has happened in coffee. Coffee was widely spread when I was born. Those early days, my grandfather used to have a very big coffee farm. By the time he died, there was no coffee farm at all because coffee was not paying. So such kind of challenges also really still.
Just to the point that you've just made, the second last point, you talked about the financing.
Yes.
Of course, I know when you started your company, the Geneplus Global company that is dealing on agriculture specifically, that was not when you started agriculture. You had started knowing and getting information way back. So you formed this out of experience and the contacts you created over time while working on the same field. Yeah? Are there some other sources? I know you mentioned the banks having the agribusiness as lot that they offer loans to the people there. But are there other sources of finances that you'd advise or mention to the youths that are coming in or are maybe having interest in agriculture, or they want to take agriculture as the last result, you know, now that maybe things are not working, the employment, because in our economy also, in our system of education, I want to believe that we are trained to finish a campus and get employment, not finish and create one for other people also. So are there some other sources of finances that you'd want to mention that you know in your knowledge, so that any youth that will be watching this can go and check and follow up if that was a challenge that they've been facing?
Yeah. Okay, quite a number. And on finance, I think one, you can get finance in many models. There are many portfolios available now that offer grants, for example, and this can come either by some donor enterprises. Even some international governments are providing such kind of grants.
Yeah.
If you have innovations that actually are game changing, disruptive innovations. But again, on finance, you can still have investors who actually are looking for enterprises that have value or have very good growth potential.
Yeah.
And some of these are multinationals or people from actually international spheres, where they are looking for enterprises where they can support somebody to be able to scale up. And those are sources of finance. So globally, you might see that there's a growing portfolio of people that are called angel investors. There are people who are actually also just coming in, equity investors. They come in, they support you, grow the business, and come out. There are also other potentials where some enterprises like the MasterCard Foundation has actually come and supported banks to create portfolios or more portfolios for agribusiness. So agribusiness is actually getting a lot of focus from many spheres. So apart from banks, people can look for available funding opportunities from NGOs, grants, and investors, as well as angel agents that are out there to support the agricultural enterprise.
We talked about the market. There is one part that I didn't hear you mention. How is the global market now, external multinational markets? How are they good or easy to access our products, especially if maybe as a Kenyan or a young upcoming agriculture person, I've gone through the processes in the country and the bureaucracy and so on. how is that market ready and how good is it that you'd say the moment my product leaves this place, I'm assured of a market over there?
Yes, I think the global market is available. The only challenge that we have for the global market is specificity of the products that they want.
Yeah.
And specificity of the products they want might be specific products as a produce.
Yeah.
It might be also specs of that product. So specs of that product can actually be traceability, as I told you about.
Yeah.
It might be also how the product was produced.
Yeah.
Or at other times you find that they're also looking at chemical residues. So you need to work within the framework. So before you even want to look at outside for an export market, you need to know the framework for what defines the products they want.
Yes.
And if you have that product, does it meet those standards? So for export market, most of the times you do not export without knowing where you're taking to. Most of the times what people do is you go seek for the market, get a tender or a contract with a potential of taker or buyer before you start producing for export. And on export, I think on Kenyan side, we have not had a lot of problems that Kenyan government is putting blockades along the way. It's actually you as a farmer to say, are you able to produce within that confine and be able to meet that market? And I know a number of friends who are actually exporting, and most of people are doing within fruits. They're doing fruits. They're doing also vegetables. But what they have done is to understand what the market they're seeking needs. So they work within that. So if they're talking about chemical residues, you need to actually have a very good maybe laboratory close by, where you actually pre-check that before you export. Because something else about that is that when you export something that is not meeting those standards, it will be rejected, but you can't bring it back. So you end up making losses. But the market is there. It's upon Kenyans to look for opportunity to get to that market. The only thing is producing within that confines might also need a lot of capital and a lot of scale, because you don't get a tender for export when you don't have scale. It is not for smallholder farmers.
Yes.
So that's a lot of times you find that the people who are actually accessing these export markets are what we call aggregators, people who are able to buy from smallholder farmers, put together and export. But now what they do is they pass on the regulations and production systems to farmers and train them on how to produce the safe food that is required out there. But the market is there.
Okay.
Yes.
Perhaps you've not experienced this, my question, but again, maybe you had maybe friend or someone having experience with it. You'd hear people complain that a typical market that all of us knows is Kangemi. There is a big market that is serving a very vast majority in this county, the Nairobi County. But again, you realize that someone would complain that as a farmer, you might not just harvest your Irish potato here, one sack, then walk with it to Kangemi that you want to sell. Few hands here and there must be greased. Yes, cartel, yeah. Have you experienced, even if you haven't, what do you think the government needed to do on that, or what can we do?
There are people who have actually come out to label some groups as cartels, and legally so there are actually some groups that are actually cartels in essence. But one, I always ask myself, before you brand that person that, is that person supporting a farmer somewhere? Because some of these people that have been called cartels have actually been the only market for farmers. And they've been supporting farmers for a long time. And two is another way to look at it is that government has let this so open to many people without control to allow for that. Like there's no formal way where farmers can sell their produce. Like I think only in Kenya that I've seen that there's a KTDA, there's a Kenya Coffee Board, and there is the Kenya Cereals Board that buys maize.
Yes.
But no other produce is being purchased through such kind of a board, and that's an organized board. It safeguards farmers. So when we have Sukuma Wiki, for example, we have potatoes, for example, as you say, without a formal way of marketing, what happens is there are people who come in between and make business out of it. At times, maybe these people might actually be too much profit chasing at the expense of the farmer, but they're also a stopgap. they are also supporting these farmers. Without them, these farmers will not even have a market in the first place. So there are two sides to it. How can we formalize and make these markets work better for the farmer, but without really not fighting these people? Because without these people, then farmers are lost. And not each and every farmer can actually take the potatoes from Nyahururu, for example, to Kangemi on a donkey cart. They need an intermediary who is able to access that market. And that is why I told you that the market, the business itself is wide. There's production, there's transportation, there are so many things, there's distribution and all that. So at times that is what it is. And it is also very expensive for farmers to think that they can sell their produce to the consumer directly. It is very difficult, because you might find the consumer market is actually far off. It might be in Mombasa, and you're a farmer with 20 sacks of potatoes in Nyahururu. For you to take them to Mombasa by yourself, it's much more expensive than having somebody else take it for you. But I do not support also that those people taking advantage of farmers and like siphoning a lot of profits for them. So, but that also needs some kind of a government framework. I know we are liberalized, but again, there should be something that can be done in that. The second side of it is to look at it. Why are farmers in a rush to sell produce immediately produced? That is the jackknut. Because, for example, if these farmers would conserve potatoes, we know we have a 3-month window where there's a lot of potatoes in the market. It means if you have a conservation, if you invest in a cooler house for potatoes today and wait for 4 months, you'll sell at a premium, because there will be no potatoes in the market. You get the point? Yeah. So we also need to know that the cycles of production, because we are rain-fed, and I mentioned this earlier, then how can we ensure that these potatoes can actually be sold across the year? You see, so that the market value for that potato is not diminished because we have an overproduction. Because overproduction is actually kind of an artificial concept. We have plenty in 2 months, and we have scarcity for 8 months.
Yeah.
Why? It's actually a process that needs to be looked into, and farmers need to be empowered to be able to conserve, and not to be in a rush to get money out of their produce. To be patient a little bit, so that they're able to sell at a premium.
Dr. Chris, I would want you to look at that camera and talk to the youths and give them the final thing that they need to do so that they can invest in agriculture, and how good or bad agriculture is.
I think, to me, one thing that I would say for Kenyan youth is mindset change. And mindset change means that we should not be already sold out to white-collar, urban-level jobs only. There are quite a lot of enterprises around agriculture that can give you money, give you the gist you want and the clout you want, and give you a good livelihood. It is of interest for our youth to first of all look at the chain, find passion in one, and be able to start chasing it. Before you invest in anything, or before you go to something, kindly also seek for information first, identify your passion within it, find value in it, and put your soul in it. For what I know is, when you start a business, don't start a business as a point of last resort. Start a business with a level to know that this business is limitless. It can grow to anything. If you're producing potatoes today, you can be producing potatoes only. You can do value addition, you can do processing, you can start restaurants and actually use the potatoes to make money out of that. And it's a whole chain. And every enterprise, every business has all the aspects tied together. So it is you to think along those lines and say, if it is a forte that you want to do, then what can you do? You can be a dairy farmer today, but your end market, what you want to be seen with or walk in town with, is a t-shirt branded some cheese name, a cheese name that is trendy, a cheese name that is attractive to maybe the youth, as you're a youth, but you started from a dairy farm. So, but end market would be then that you're going to be producing cheese for the market, and that cheese will be trendy, or you're going to even produce chocolate. So it is within the enterprise, but you started from somewhere. So think about the chain and know that anything that you're going to put in your mouth, how trendy it is because somebody made it from a farm. So it can still be associated to the youth with all the trendiness it has, but produced by the youth. So the youth should look at agriculture from all aspects and also look at agriculture as a source of value and a source of income and some very sustainable enterprise. That is my take.
In our system of education, we are being taught agriculture. Is there a different way that you want the schools to structure and teach the agriculture with a lot more vigor?
As well, and this is out of international exposure, that colleges and training centers should actually also be attached to have working partnerships with farms, so that these farms can also take up some of the innovations they come up with, and part of the entrepreneur or interns that are going to implement these come from these training schools. It actually inculcates quite a lot of information that it should be on paper. In agriculture, it doesn't matter if you got an A or you got a D. It all that matters is, are you able to put all that together into a productive unit that gives you money? So it doesn't matter. You can have the A people be CEOs of maybe business that have been started by D people. So it doesn't matter. And I think, to me, hands-on is very important.
What is your take on agribusiness in the building this economy or the future of Kenyan economy?
You started very well when you made an introduction to this meeting, and you mentioned about agriculture contributing a big chunk to the GDP. And this means that it is without doubt that agriculture is actually a backbone for Kenyan economy. So what are we doing about it? I think that's what all government should actually look at. Before you come up with a manifesto to even think about how you can empower people, change the Kenyan economy, then you need to ask yourself, how much are we doing or supporting our backbone of the economy, which is agriculture? And unfortunately in Kenya, a lot of talk is made, but little is done. If you drive to Mombasa, for example, and you find that there's a lot of vast free land along the way, and you wonder why Kenyan actually is food insecure. The same is, we have vast tracts of land in the northern Kenya. You know, it is a pity when you look at all these and remember that some of the most secure countries in the world in food is Israel, which is in the middle of a desert. We only have semi-arid lands. We don't have a desert in Kenya. And some of these semi-arid lands have big rivers passing through them. There's a lot that government can do to ensure that people can get land. Like even the case of the youth not having parcels of land. What would happen if government converted all these parcels of land, divided them and leased out to youth for enterprises? And they would actually do segmental agriculture depending on the sections they are given. And to me, I think there's a lot the government can do and to turn around all this. So it needs goodwill, just from budgetary allocation, the focus on agriculture, and also appropriate investments into agriculture. And then this can be done by government, private sector, or even attracting foreign investments in agriculture. So it's something that can be done, and all this actually it comes from the top. When government has the will and the drive and attract appropriate investments in that sector, people will actually put money in it.
Your last word for the show?
I think, to me, I say there are many enterprises, and I think the whole world is looking at entrepreneurship as the next frontier for job creation. And entrepreneurship should not be limited to tech. It should not be limited to urban level entrepreneurships or trendy entrepreneurships. I think entrepreneurship is all rounded, and I think agribusiness provides the biggest, if not the best, of opportunities for entrepreneurship.
Thank you so much. Like I said, I'm humbled and very grateful that you attended. This is the Trend Show, and I'm Hussein Robert. This is the show that puts you on a journey on knowing or finding out how you can make yourself economically stable. We've had a talk with Dr. Chris Silali, who is the CEO of Geneplus Global and working tremendously good in agricultural area. My name is Hussein, and this is the Trend Show. Thank you.